Shalom, 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 shalom. I'm Rapha'Yah. We are going to delve into this amazing Torah portion, Parashat Toledot, or Torah portion Toledot, which means generations. So let's start off right away, and we can dig deeper into what the Creator speaks about. Yaakov speaks about Esau, speaks about Yitzhak, and what happened when someone who's really putting a lot of effort on getting the blessing, getting the firstborn right. And there is reasons why Yaakov or Jacob wanted to get these blessings and the firstborn right. So let's get deep into it so we can meditate a little bit. Why is it very important today as Torah students to know what we're looking for? We can see two phases here. Pretty much one is the face of Yaakov, and the other one is the face of Esau. Those two phases are basically similar one another. You have to understand that, and let me just pause here for a moment. Esau and Jacob were twins. They were literally replicas one another. And this gives us the momentum to understand why is it that we, as individuals, have the same, one time we can have one character, another time we can have another character. We have kind of like two phases sometimes. So we need to recognize that ourselves. Let's just go back. So this Parashat Toledot, which means generations, tell us something very, very interesting on this Shabbat. Chapter 25, verse 19 to 28, verse 9. Here is the Toledot, which means generations of Yitzhak, the son of Abraham. Abraham begat Yitzhak. Now, there are two things that I want you to see. The first one is Toledot, which means generations. And the next one is the word begat, which is down here. So let's look into the first one. The word Toledot, which means generations, are one of the letters that really brings my attention so much is the letter Wow. But if you notice, the letter Wow here with Yitzhak is the second letter. The first one is Tau. The first one here on your right. Remember that Hebrews is written from right to left. So Toledot, right to left, which is the letter Tau, and then the Wow. But if you notice Toledot, the letter Wow is basically in the very end. This gives us the analogy that, remember that Yitzhak have two sons, twins, Jacob and Esau. It gives us the momentum that perhaps Esau supposed to be the firstborn, but remember that he saw his right of the firstborn. There is something coded in there. The first one is that here in the word Toledot, the letter Wow happens to be the first one on Yitzhak generations, but in the generation of Esau happens to be the last one. Doesn't it remind us that our Mashiach, Yahushua, told us that phrase, very noticeable phrase that goes like this: the first ones will be last and the last will be first. In other words, Yaakov is supposed to be the second of the firstborn, right? Supposed to be the second born, but because he wanted the firstborn right, and we're gonna delve into it in just a moment. Here it gives us a momentum in the Hebrew encoded that Yaakov became the first one. You see? Let me just show you one more time, and you're free to delve into this, into the Hebrew, and you will see what I'm talking about. So let's go to the next thing. The second word that I want you to see is the word begat. Abraham begat, because here you can pretty much see the generations of Yitzhak, but here Abraham begot Yitzhak. What's the difference between Toledot, which is generations, and the word begot? Now, one thing is the physical generation, and here begot, let's delve into it. The word begot basically means in Hebrew haulit. Haulit is basically the word for begot. Now, let's look into two things. Toledot is basically the generations or the DNA of Abraham. The DNA of Abraham. But here, in Haulit is basically a different wording, which means in Hebrew, Yalad, that's the actual root of the word, but it basically means to raise, to give birth medically. But what it really draws my attention is here the word show lineage. Now, why does it gives us the Torah on the word Yalad to show the lineage? Is basically two things. The first one, let me go back over here. The first one is basically the word Haulit is making his cousin, Yitzhak's cousin, to succeed. How does it happen? By making a choice. So in other words, have you ever heard of the word or the phrase cause and effect? Is basically that. He chose to choose Torah. He chose to follow Yahweh. He chose to follow Torah and the commandments of Yahweh. So therefore, there is an effect, and the effect was the blessing of Yahweh on his generations. So we see basically the word Haulit is basically you making a choice, and that choice is following Yahweh Sebaot. Now let's go into the next thing, where the same word Haulit is the word or the root of the word Yalad, which means show the lineage. But the question is, how do we show the lineage? The answer is basically this. I want you to go and read this, Targum Yonatan, the Aramaic version of this verse. Look at what it says. These are the generations of Yitzhak bar Abraham. And because Yitzhak's appearance resembles Abraham's appearance, the Son of Man said, in truth, Abraham begot Yitzhak. Do you see that? So in other words, the reason why I show you this is because I want you to understand that Abraham's lineage is so important for you and I today and everyone else, is because at that time Abraham was only able to have one child. Remember, they were in advancing age. He was 100. Sarah was almost 102. So therefore, it gives us a momentum to understand that Yitzhak or Isaac was the only one to be born, and that's it. But not only that, think it logically right now. What would you think if an older person had a child? Wouldn't you think it twice today, thinking that perhaps the woman probably had an affair because the man, of course, couldn't have any kids? Of course. So, in other words, the word Yalad means that they resemble. In other words, Yitzhak looked exactly as his father, to make clear evidence for everyone around that was Abraham's son. And I will show you something that is actually happening in this day and age. If you can notice, the father is on the left side and the son is on the right side. It gives us the evidence that, of course, he is his son. If you notice here, the father is on the left side, the son is on the right side, and a well-known actor, Clint Eastwood. If you notice his son, that he looks basically like similar to his father as well when he was young, of course. And if you notice the father here on the left side and his son on the right, you can clearly know that that was, you cannot contest this. You can even lose this in court. Why? Because it's a clear evidence that's basically his son. So let's continue. So another word that I want you to understand, which is basically written in the Hebrew, and you can actually check it out in the Hebrew, in the Torah, is the word Yalad Et Yitzhak. Et is basically Aleph Tau. But we all know that if you're a believer of the Mashiach, you know that Aleph Tau is none other than Mashiach Yahushua himself. So basically, like we were just talking a few moments ago, we know that just like the word Yalad, which means similar, like identical, is basically yielding to the Mashiach, foreshadow of the Mashiach. And I want you to see something very important. Look at the book of Hebrews 1:3, who being the radiance of the kabod or steam, the very expression of the essence of Yahweh in sustaining all things by the devar or the word of his power. Basically, what we've seen here is that our Mashiach is a pure expression of Yahweh Sabaoth. That's why when they ask him, show us the Father, show us Yahweh, he replied, all this time I've been with you and you haven't seen it? Now, in another time, this will be another time for another video, we're talking about if the Mashiach, Yahushua, is the same as Yahweh. That will be explained in another video in another time. But basically what I can tell you based upon the scriptures themselves is that our Mashiach is the essence of Yahweh. He is the son of Yahweh. He is the servant of Yahweh. And therefore, he's the word of Yahweh. So it's different from one saying he is Yahweh. No, he is the son of Yahweh. That's what the titles are, the Father, and the other one is the Son. You see, that's two different titles. Now, like I said, that will be for another time. Let's continue. Chapter 25, verse 20. Yitzhak was 40 years old when he took Rivkah, the son of Bethuel, the Arami of Padam Aram, the sister of Laban, the Arami, to be his wife. Now, if you notice on this verse, in the very beginning of the Torah portion, we can actually see that the word Arami or Aram is written twice. This gives us the anomaly that perhaps something is encoded in there in the Hebrew, and the reason for it is because the word Arami, if you flip it backwards, is the word that I will show you in a moment. So chapter 25 verse 20, Laban the Arami backwards or flip it is basically the word Ramai, which means the deceiver. We know for a fact in the Torah, in the book of Yasher as well, that Laban was a trickster. He was a deceiver for the very beginning. We know that land where Abraham came out was a place where there were tricksters. Laban happens to be one of them. And no wonder why he tricked Yaakov with Leah and later with his second wife, which happens to be the first one. So let's continue so we can see. Pretty much as we said earlier, Arami is basically the word backwards, Ramai, if you notice here. Now, chapter 25, verse 23, who said to him, there are two nations in your womb, from birth they will be two rival peoples. of these peoples will be stronger than the other, and the greater will serve the younger. Now, reason why I'm kind of fast forwarding right now is because I want you to understand that this Torah portion is pretty much very extensive, in other words, and we're just going to cover quite a few important things. And the reason why I bring this is because when Rivka she thought that she was having a child, just a single child, but it happens to be twins. And the book of Yasher, it says very clear that she went to Shem, which is Melchizedek. She went to Abraham to ask for advice because the kids were moving very strongly. And she said in the book of Yasher that she passed by an idolater's temple, and the child was moving, the baby was moving. But when he passed where they worship Yahweh, the child was moving. So she thought that the child was going to be a double-minded, just like the Samaritans, that they worship Yahweh and they worship their own Elohim or idols. But Abraham and Shem told her that no, you have two babies inside. They have twins. One will serve Yahweh and the other ones will serve Elohim, or which means the demons or idols. Let's continue. Look at what the Targum Jonathan said. Yahweh said unto him, two peoples are in the womb, and two kingdoms of thy womb shall be separated. And one kingdom shall be stronger than the other, and the greater will serve the younger. If the sons of the younger keep the mitzvot of the Torah, then they will be blessed. That if you continue that verse in the Targum Jonathan, you will see that's what it means. So in other words, what it's basically saying, it's that if we keep the commandments of Yahweh, we'll be stronger than the enemy. We'll be stronger than the nations. We'll be stronger than the idolaters. In fact, that is true. Let's continue. 25:30 of Genesis, and say, Yaakov, please let me gobble up some of that red thing. That red thing, I'm exhausted. And that's why he was called Edom, which means red. Yaakov answered, first sell me this day your birthright. Now, the reason why I'm fast forwarding, like when they were adults, and let's not think that they were like 15, 20 years. They were an adults. Nowadays, it's basically a senior citizen. They were like about 60s. Okay? They were already grown-ups. And it's interesting to know that where Esau was coming from, he came from killing Nimrod. Now, I want to make a little parenthesis here, and I want you to understand that the Nimrod that we're talking about here is the second Nimrod, which is Tammuz. He was the one who Esau killed. The first Nimrod also was a slaughter as well. And guess who killed him? It was Shem, Melchizedek. So there are two characters here. The first one and the second. The second is that Esau killed. Now, not only that he killed him, but also he stole the garments of Adam. I want you to understand that it is very important why the garments of Adam are essential. The garments of Adam are supposed to be passed on from one generation to another, supposed to end up with Shem, which is Melchizedek. You have to understand that the lineage of the priestly lineage supposed to go through one generation to another, but it was given, actually, Ham stole these garments, okay, gave it to the next son, and he wound up with Nimrod. That's why he became very powerful. in that era. But guess who killed him? He killed Esau killed him, and those garments he took them home, which we'll delve in a little bit. Now let's continue. Look at the book of Yashar 27 verse 12. He said unto his brother Jacob, behold, I will die this day, and why then do I desire the birthright? Jacob acted wisely with Esau in this matter. Esau sold his birthright to Jacob because Yahweh did so. We have to see something very interesting here. Yahweh allowed this situation to happen, and the reason for it, and I'm going to ask you this question, and think it for a moment. Jacob was a man that did not want to serve Yahweh, plain and simple. He was idolater. He actually tricked his father, which is Yitzhak, thinking that he was a righteous man. And the reason why you see Yitzhak blind is because Esau used to burn a lot of scent at home, and that's one of the reasons why his father got blinded. Now, there is something very important I want you to understand, is the reason why Yahweh allowed this to happen is because according to chapter 19 of Exodus, or Shemot, it says very clear that the priestly right to serve Yahweh was the firstborn. Now, it's very interesting that Esau is supposed to be the one serving Yahweh and being the next priest, but do you imagine if this wind up in the hands of Esau? All this will be completely dead. And the reason for it, remember what the scripture says, that a curse would not come if there's no cause. If there's a cause, it's because there is a breaking of Yahweh's commandments. Esau did so. He was an idolater, and therefore the curse came. The blessing and the priestly right would end up with Esau, and it would die with Esau. So that's one of the reasons why Yaakov knew this from Shem, which is Melchizedek, and Abraham. Remember that at that time, Abraham was still alive. Well, actually, when he went to, I want to make that little parenthesis as well, that when Yaakov was making the lentils, that day, Abraham died, and Yitzhak asked him to go make some lentils, because lentils, because it's round, it means the circle of life. Now, in that same era, Shem is still alive. So this knowledge was passed on to not only to Yitzhak, but also to Yaakov as well. Remember that Yaakov also went to the school or the yeshiva of Torah of Shem. Not only Abraham, but Shem, Melchizedek. So knowing all this information, now we understand why he acted the way he acted. Now we know that he needed to have the firstborn right so we can continue the priestly service to Yahweh. Now let's continue. One thing that he acted on was making sure that this was engraved or recorded. Look at what it says in the book of Yashar 27 verse 13. And the portion of Esau in the cave of the field of Machpelah, which Abraham had bought from the sons of Chet for burial possession. Esau also sold to Jacob, and Jacob bought all this from his brother Esau from the value given. Now, I want to stop a little bit here, and I want you to understand the first portion that you just read and the portion of Esau in the cave, which means that, remember that Abraham bought in the previous Torah portion, we talk about the cave of Machpelah. Machpelah is basically the double cave, and that's where Adam Eve or Chava, Abraham and Sarah were basically buried, but Abraham already have the portion of Esau in the cave of Machpelah, in that burial. But because he sold everything, was included also the right to be buried in the cave of Machpelah. But the interesting thing is that Yaakov recorded all this, and let's continue because I want you to see this. He recorded everything. It's just like today. I think it's better terminology today. If you don't have a receipt, not even in court, you can contest it. So that's why he acted very wisely. He needed to record all this, not just verbally, because today, if you just say verbally, nothing will happen. The other person, the other party is going to deny it. So that's why he acted very, very, very smart, very wisely. And it's something that we ought to learn. Every transaction that we make, doesn't matter what kind of transaction you make, it has to be a written document. You need to have receipts. Otherwise, you will be losing your right to whatever you're purchasing now. 27 verse 14, Yaakov wrote all this down in the book, testified to it with witnesses, and sealed it. In the book was in Yaakov's hand. So basically, he recorded everything, making sure that even witnesses, to make sure that everything that he was making, that transaction of the firstborn right, was sealed off, and making sure that there will be no retraction on this. Now let's talk about, before we don't want to make it too long, but I want to talk about the Berachah. Berachah is basically the blessing of Yitzhak towards, in this case, is Yaakov. Yaakov and Esau were 63 when the blessing was imparted by making Yitzhak 123 years old and dies 180 years old. Now, if you remember in the Torah, it says very clear that he asked Esau to make him a meal because he thought he was going to die. But that was not the case. He still had more years, like 50 plus years, to still live. Remember that Yaakov left home twice. The second time he went to his uncle Laban, and Yitzhak is still alive. That means it was quite a long time that still left for his father to be alive. But thinking that he was going to die, that's why he gave the blessing. Now let's continue. 27 verse 15 of Genesis. Then Rivkah took the best clothes from Esau, her oldest son, which she had with her in the house, and put them on Yaakov, her youngest son. This is what the Torah says, but let's look at what the Targum Yonatan says of this verse. And Rivkah took the nice garments of Esau, his oldest son, who had it previously, been Adam's. But what Esau hadn't said that day, he stayed with her in the house. With them, he clothed Yaakov, his youngest son. Once again, how everything revolves into the first, how everything began. You started out with Adam, right? And it's supposed to go to Shem, but Shem did not have those garments because ended up with Ham, because he stole them. But he winds up once again with Yaakov. Do you see this? Reason why is because you need to have that blessing, the Birkah Kohanim, the Aaronic blessing, what you call it today. But it needed to have that those garments. And the reason why is because Yaakov was going to continue the priestly service to Yahweh. And it's amazing because he has all this in this very special moment when he's about to receive this father's blessing. 27 verse 22, Yaakov approached Yitzhak his father, who touched him and said, The voice is the voice of Yaakov, but the hands are the hands of Esau. Now, why does the Torah speaks of the voice of Yaakov, but the hands of Esau? And the reason for it is because you have to think it for a moment. You don't think that that Rivka knew why is she doing all this? You have to think it for a moment, because if you read the entire chapter, Rivka did not want his first son to get the blessing, which is Esau. He wanted Yaakov to have the blessing. And the reason for it is because this is very powerful. This is very important for us to understand that blessings are something very important, because when you invoke the word, it becomes a reality. That's what you have to understand in the Torah. It's not just saying whatever you want to say. No, it has weight. It has weight. And that weight it goes through generations. So another question that we have to ask ourselves, why is it that why is it that Yitzhak still gave him the blessing? He knew it was Yaakov because he heard his voice, and he still gave him the blessing. And I think deep inside, he wanted to give it to him. And the reason for it is because, once again, Yaakov better have it than his younger or oldest son, the firstborn. Now let's continue. And I want you to see something that is encoded here in the Torah. Why is it that the Torah encodes the voice of Yaakov in the hands of Esau? But first, I want you to understand first, Adam is the first man on earth. David is the Melech David, right? And Mashiach is our Mashiach of Israel, all from the same lineage. But I want you to understand that Adam, the whole world, a word, Adam is basically Aleph, Dalet, Mem. It's all encoded with Adam, David, and Mashiach. The first one, which is Adam, he failed to make things heavens here on earth, the same as David. But our Mashiach is the one who's triumphed, and he will triumph when he returns. Joshua and Joseph and David was rejected by his own brothers, and this is just a fact. Jacob was rejected by his own brother. And we see the pattern, as I always state, that the history repeats itself. Ecclesiastes 1:9. Always a principle, there's always a format that we have to follow in the Torah. The first to come out was Adomi, which is reddish, and covered with all the sides with hair, like a skin, and they name it Esau, which is fully formed, hairy. What it means is basically that when Esau came out like a ball of hair, like a ball of fur. Even he had a mustache. Do you believe that? How this kid was very full of hair. So one thing that we see here is that that's why it was called reddish, which is Adomi. The word is Adomi. And let's continue. Another word for Adomi, or another person who became Adomi, guess who was? Adam too as well. Chapter 2 verse 7, and Yahweh Ayil formed Adam, which is man, from the dust of the ground. And the dust of the ground, which is the word in Hebrew is Adamah. So basically we see the second Adomi, with second red. The first one is Adam, the second is Esau, and the third is who? Who do you think is the third? Is basically David. And the fourth one, who do you think it is? Is the Mashiach. Look what it says here. Isaiah 30 verse 20. Though Yahweh has given him the scarcity and water oppression, your teacher will no longer hide, but your eyes will hold your teacher. One thing that I wanted to bring on this Torah portion is that our Messiah, our Mashiach, is being hiding for 2,000 years. And what do you think is being hiding? He's being hiding in Edom. Edom is another word for Christianity. And that's why when Yitzhak heard the voice of Yaakov, but touched the hands of Esau, is basically telling us that our Mashiach is being wearing a different clothing. He's being wearing, that's why we can recognize him. We can recognize the Jewish Messiah, the Hebrew Messiah. We've been seeing this whole time the Christian Roman, Greco-Roman Messiah, which is not the one that the scriptures talks about. So let's continue. Look at what it says here. Isaiah 63 verse 1. Who's that coming from Edom? A Bosra in crimson, stained robes, so magnificently dressed, so majestic in his great power? Is it I who speak triumphantly and most empowered to save? So who do you think is this? Who do you think is this person who's coming? He's basically the Mashiach. This prophecy hasn't been fulfilled yet. It will be fulfilled when the Mashiach returns. The Mashiach is being sold to the Christian world for 2,000 years. He's been wearing the Roman garments, the Egyptian garments, just like Joseph was wearing. He's been hiding, but he no more is going to hide. He will reveal himself once again. In us, the house of Israel, we need to make him known to the world, the real Messiah, the real Mashiach. We're going to be closing. 63 verse 2. Why is red, the word is Edom, your outfit, your clothes like someone who had trodden the winepress? This is what's going to happen when the Mashiach returns, which this prophecy, of course, it has a lot to do with the return of our Mashiach. It will be another time for another video. The idea is like the ancient redeemers, Joseph, Moshe in Egypt, and Esther in Persia. Melech HaMashiach will be hidden among the Israelites' enemies. He's been hiding for so long. It is time for us to make him known. It is time for us to make him the real Messiah of the scriptures, not the Christian or not the Roman or the Protestant. We're talking about the real Messiah of the scriptures, what the Torah speaks of him. We know that Joseph was wearing the Egyptian garments. That's why his brothers could not recognize him. We know that Hadassah or Esther was the queen, but we know that she was a Jewish woman. We know that our Messiah is being hiding in Edom, which is a Christian or Christianity, but now the Hebrew Messiah is going to be revealed, and it is revealing today, and it is time for us to acknowledge him. It is time for us to make him known. I think it's time for us to make him see on the nations all this. And I think it's fair for us to say nowadays that we're living in the last generation, that we need to make the best of it, especially not to be ashamed of our Messiah, because he's the one who's going to be ashamed of us if we deny him. So let's continue this path. Let's continue this learning more Torah, not just Shabbat, not just this Shabbat, but every day until the day we die. I'm Moreh Rapha'Yah. Thank you for being with us. Once again, if you haven't subscribed, please do so. There are many productions are coming that I'm making, and Rapha'Yah Productions. And there are more videos that I'm actually producing besides the teaching that are coming very, very soon. So hang in there, and may Yahweh bless you and keep you. Shalom, shalom.